It is all downhill. Well, it is good to talk with you, my friend. I've checked out a lot of your stuff and been really inspired, which is why I was like, we got to talk to this guy about what to do in the holiday season with fitness, mental health, all that good stuff. So maybe for those who don't know you very well, could you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us a little about you.
Long story short, I was on reality TV over the last year. I was the lead of The Bachelor. That finished in March. Prior to that, I'd spent the majority of my life playing football. And now currently, I'm a mental and physical wellness advocate. I speak around the country on mental health. I'm writing a mental health book. I'm also creating a forum where individuals can go to get resources and talk about the struggles they face, and then get my real estate license. So just kind of doing a little
Oh,
bit
wow.
of everything
Okay,
right
so you
now
got a
for
lot
me,
going on.
what I feel is best, but being able to chase my passions, which is being able to help others through their struggles, through sharing my own experiences and destigmatizing these conversations. So that's what I'm currently doing, and life's been good.
I love that. How often do you get recognized from The Bachelor?
I gotta shout my mom
Is that a
out
frequent
real
thing
quick. I
or
saw
not so
she
much?
hopped on here. So hi, Mom. Um,
That's
it
great.
depends where I go. So and it also depends what environment I'm in. So if I go to a bar that has, young professionals, or if there are college kids around, I'll usually get spotted. But sometimes, and I'm in Scottsdale, so if I go downtown, that's the case too. It just really depends on the
Gotcha.
audience that I'm around. But it's usually good things at this point. I don't get too many people that come up to me and try to pick a fight, so that's nice.
That's always a good day for me when no
Yeah,
one picks a
exactly.
fight with me. So okay. I think what I love about that is you got to kind of have a platform to talk about some of these things that were really important to you, right? Like mental health and fitness, and why is it so important to you, and kind
Yeah,
of where
so
did that
for
come
me,
from?
the importance of it is that it really sets the tone for my day to day. So, of course, if I'm having a bad mental health day, that's going to impact the way I treat others, the way I view myself, the actions that I take, uh, my work that I'm doing, whether I have motivation or not. All of these things are impacted by my mental state. And so I've realized that I have to be able to do whatever I can to put myself in the best mental state possible. And in order to do that, I had to start gaining a better understanding of why I am the way that I am. So I started taking a deep dive back
Mm.
into past trauma in my life that I never really addressed. And through starting to address these struggles that I've had, I started to gain a better understanding of who I am as an individual. And so now I bring to my day confidence, a renewed sense of self. I have more self-belief than I've ever had. And I'm just a positive, happier person. It doesn't mean I don't have bad days, but I know what I stand for. I know what my purpose is. And so I'm just doing that on a daily basis. And now I'm hoping to help others get to that same place, because there are many of us out there that aren't addressing our struggles. We suppress them. And when you suppress them, they never go away. They just go away for another day, but then they can resurface with any instance that pops up. You never know what could possibly trigger it. And so I think that it should be our goal to find healthy ways to address it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think that's awesome that you had the courage to kind of step out and say, like, we have to talk about some of this stuff, because as a therapist, obviously, I usually get involved when we haven't dealt with it for a long time, and then it comes out in other places. And so for me, working with people, if we don't have kind of that physical fitness and that health there, it is really challenging to work through the other stuff. Is that something you've kind of
Yeah,
noticed
I
with
mean,
people too?
I'm gonna hold on. Got my fans making weird noises. Um, okay, well, if you heard it, yeah,
I didn't want
it
to
was
say
driving me
anything. I
nuts.
could
I
hear
just,
it. No,
all
I'm
of a sudden
just
you
kidding.
focus on something and you just can't stop thinking about it. So that pulled, yeah, that
Never
was
done that.
pulling my
Nope,
attention.
can't relate.
Yeah, I've realized that people are starting to open up more to me now that I've been an open book. So I kind of come across as someone who it's safe to open up to. And I think that's the biggest thing is most individuals, they don't know who they can open up to. And they're concerned, if I open up to this person, how are they going to receive me? And so I think the important thing is the more people that talk about these struggles, the more open we are about it. We almost are a beacon of light where we say, hey, listen, like, I'm over here speaking about this, so I am someone that you can come talk to about these matters. And you'll feel less alone in doing so, because we'll be able to relate through probably the struggles we're facing. and then we can find hopefully some great resources for you. I try to partner up with experts because I'm not an expert that's trained. So I try to partner up with organizations and individuals that can then get these individuals on the right path. So, but there's still so many stigmas, and there's still, I know with men, guys not wanting to open up because of toxic masculinity and how they're going to be perceived by the public. And I think that's also with women too. I think we're all fearful of how we're going to be perceived by our peers in some aspects. So a lot of us would rather not subject ourselves to judgment, so we hold things in. So I think we still have to be able to somehow navigate around that fear, but how that looks to each individual can be a little bit different. I think having the conversations, though, is a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm grateful that you're that beacon, because I think that oftentimes that's the catalyst for people asking for help and talking to other people, is just seeing someone else who's doing that, right? Even if they don't have the expertise, just being that person who says, here I am, I'm available to do it. And to your point, it's like we can all have mental health problems, like that's becoming more acceptable, but it always feels like it's on a spectrum, right? Like you can have some mental health problems, some bad days, but like it can't go too far, because if it goes too far, then that means something else.
I'm sure you can speak to that better than I can, because you see this, I'm sure with your practice. But it's interesting. I've never thought about it with, I guess, a spectrum. So I mean, if do you have people voicing that of like, hey, I only feel comfortable opening up about, one or two things. I don't want to, like, is it considered, maybe are they concerned about trauma dumping or overwhelming individuals? I mean, I am kind of curious because I've never thought about it. I've been very open, and I've just talked about everything. And maybe I have kind of went like trauma dumped and I've just let it all out, and that could be. But is that something you see often that individuals talk about as a struggle? They don't know how much they should?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think for some people it feels like it's okay to be depressed, but a little depressed, right? So if you kind of say you're feeling depressed for, 4 or 5 days, like maybe that's okay. But if that lasts weeks or months, then that becomes a little less acceptable. Or if we have anxiety, it's okay to have some anxiety, but if I'm having panic attacks and it's changing how people act around me, then that's too much. And so I think we're still sometimes wrestling with like being accurate about the problem. Like it's okay to kind of lift the lid a little bit. Sometimes people struggle with, can I really show them the
and do you feel that's because
of
the fear of judgment, or what do you think's mainly driving that?
Yeah, because I think we all want to be accepted and loved, right? Like that's our primary pursuit. And so I think it's kind of like, well, if it's okay to talk about this and I can still be loved and accepted, then I want to say what's okay. But if I go too far and I lose out on that, then that's a big deal, right? And I don't want people to think I'm too damaged or I'm too broken. And so I want to kind of, have some of the issue, but not the whole issue. And so the challenge is then for people is it's really hard to get the help they need because they're not really accurate.
And so, I mean, it sounds like, do a lot of people that you speak to, or do they kind of talk themselves out of talking to others? I mean, I assume they come to you because they think, okay, you have the title behind you. So that's why that they know they can go for a judgment-free zone. But do you find most individuals talk themselves out of opening up to others?
Yeah, I think it's, sometimes we open up and we're not used to doing that. And so that vulnerability kind of gives us what we call a vulnerability hangover, right? So it's like, well, I just told all these people all this stuff, and now, did I really just do that? And so then they back it off, right? So it's like, well, I've been anxious and I had a panic attack yesterday and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, did I just tell somebody that? And so then they dial it back. And so the challenge is it's still there. To your earlier point, like it didn't go anywhere. We're just talking about it less because we have that vulnerability.
No, it's really just interesting to think about it. And you're touching on how people feel comfortable with only, like, they don't want to overdo it. But I wonder, like, what is it, just because we've never really talked about it in general, that now we have this fear gauge of overdoing it? Like, what I'm trying to figure out, like, what set the parameters for people feeling that there's like a certain threshold or limit of like, okay, like you said, I had an anxiety attack or panic attack yesterday, so now I can't open up to this person today because they may think, okay, these are back-to-back days, this person's just crazy. I mean, I never really thought about being too vulnerable in that aspect, and like almost being like, okay, I'd open up this week, so I won't open up until next week. It's just interesting. I didn't I wonder why this limit was put into place. Is it just because we never talked about it, so we don't know where the limit is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I would agree with you. I think that has a lot to do with it. I also think sometimes people are really afraid of being too much. You know what I mean? They maybe have been told somewhere in their life that they're too much. And so it's like, I just want to talk a little bit, but I don't want to go
Yeah.
past that point because then I might not be accepted. And so I think the challenge is like during the holiday season, people might say like I'm struggling a little bit, but they might not really let everybody else in on it because they don't want to kill the mood, right? I got the Christmas tree. We're all excited over here. Who wants to hear about your depression, right? So you can be depressed in passing, but
Yeah.
like I don't want too much of that
No,
stuff.
that's actually that's a great. I think a lot of times it is environmental as far as I've found myself doing this. I'm like, when is the right time to talk to somebody? When everything's going bad, so you can just finally you can kind of put that in there as well. Like, well, hey, since the mood's soured, I kind of want I'll talk about it now. But then you're like, well, I don't want to make the mood any worse. But then on the flip side, you might be at a family gathering and everyone's back from the holidays and everyone's excited to be together, and you could be struggling internally. But I've definitely had those moments where I've thought, I don't want to open up about my struggles right now because the mood's exciting. The Christmas music is playing, everyone's playing games, we're all together, and this just doesn't feel like the right time. And I think that's the tough part, is when is the right time? Because I do feel that what I found is, I think the best time is to, in my opinion, I found is I do it when I feel that I need to speak about it, because the alternative is if I suppress it, it's going to actually be more damaging to me in that moment. So, but I think for everyone, it depends, right? It's like, when is the right time? And I think during the holidays, there's the pressure of, well, this is a happy time of year for most people, so maybe I should hold off until the New
Right.
Year's, is maybe the thought.
Right. And the problem, like you said, is it kind of makes it worse, right? Is because we're still dealing with it now. We just don't have anyone that knows because we don't want to be that guy, right? Everyone's laughing and watching Hallmark movies, and you're like, hey, can I talk to you about my struggles? And it just feels like, oh man, should I do that? But to your point, I think when it wells up inside you, that's telling you to do something, right? And so I don't know, that stuffing it is going to help that. I think at that point, it's just saying like, hey, can we have a conversation? And if now is not the time, can we have one later? I think just even leading with that
Yeah,
question to
yeah. I
somebody
think
might be really
obviously just like
helpful.
asking more questions in general can always help us understand more about ourselves and the world around us. Actually, something that just popped up in my head. Do you see more clients come in during this time of the year, or is it pretty, like, do you see from a seasonal standpoint that it ebbs and flows from like summer to winter and that type of deal?
Yeah, yeah,
Very
absolutely. So I live in
cool.
South
Yeah,
Dakota. So right now there's like snow and it's super cold.
yeah,
Definitely an uptick, right? Because people are like, it's freezing outside and it's kind of miserable. But I think with the holidays, what happens is that old wounds kind of get activated. So if we've got wounds around our family or our marriage or relationship isn't quite what we want, now is the time that really reminds us of that. And so I think for a lot of people, kind of whatever's going on is magnified. And then to your point, it feels like, who can I talk to? Because I don't want to kill the mood. And so I see much more clients then than say summer, for instance, when people are usually doing more
yeah.
things
And
and a little more
I guess
distracted.
a follow up to that. Sorry, I'm just so curious here because I'm not in your position. I'm not, but
But
I'm
I
not in your
love it,
position,
man.
but I
This is
wonder.
great.
So yeah, around this time of the year, it's very family oriented for most people. If you're celebrating American holidays, you have Thanksgiving, it's a big gathering, Christmas, big gathering. So do you see the topics that people come to you about also change to be more family focused, struggles with interpersonal relationships more so in like the winter time versus maybe in the summer, it's more of a different subject matter? I mean, do you see that it's more interpersonal based around this time of year because it's everything's social with the holidays that we're talking about?
Yeah, because it feels harder to avoid, right? So around Thanksgiving and Christmas, there's like this pull, even just culturally, to be with your family. And so it's like we have to speak to that. I think in the summertime, we can kind of hide out from that. We can go somewhere over the fourth or kind of do some of these things. And it's not really seen as odd to do that. But Christmas, if you don't spend Christmas with your family, I think most people are like, well, why is that? Like they actually would ask that. And so then we have to face
Yeah.
some of these things that might be
And I
really
see someone in
challenging.
here talked about and I've seen this a few times, the loss of a loved one around this time. So it opens up, you mentioned this old wounds, but I've heard that a couple times where someone loses someone around this time of the year, it doesn't bring them that same type of excitement. They don't remember the holidays for the good and gathering. They're remembering it for the loss. So I think it's very dependent, it's very specific to the individual themselves. And I think that's something that I've noticed in my position is I try to be very careful because, as you know, everybody is different, and words matter, and people take words differently. And so, what would you recommend for somebody? Let's say that there's, I'm me, and you're one of my family members, and I'm thinking, or I come to you about my struggles, and I'm like, hey, I'm really suffering, and I don't know if I need to be more specific here. I'd like to give the example, but what is the best thing you can do as someone who's receiving that to be able to make it as welcoming as possible?
Yeah, I think just to listen first, right? So, I mean, I think the challenge sometimes, even as men, is we always want to fix it, right? So if there's a fix, I want to give you the fix. And I had a great mentor that said, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so we got to be careful because this isn't a nail. And so we just have to understand that if a person comes to us, that's a vulnerable place to be. And so it's not our job to fix it, but just to meet them there. And the beautiful thing is that people will usually tell you what they need, right? So it's our rush is to kind of figure it out for them. But if they need something more than listening, they'll usually tell you
I
that.
think that's awesome. I mean, again, it's always great to just hear different perspectives, but I've always felt, for me, and it's interesting. I mean, I'm somebody that when I come to somebody, I tell them, and I'm looking for a fix, but not everybody is.
I love
though.
that. Yep.
I mean, that's where I think I had to be mindful,
Right.
and I've had this issue with my past relationships, or just other people where they come to me and I'm looking to fix. So I'm almost like the hammer and the nail. I'm like, oh, here's a nail, here's a problem, let me hammer it, let me fix it. And then you find out you almost do more damage because that person's just wanting to be heard and seen, and isn't necessarily looking for that fix in the moment. So it is, yeah.
It's tough though, isn't it? I mean, sometimes it just seems so I just want to give you the fix. I just want to make it okay. And so it's hard when we don't, right? But at the same time, that's often what they need is just that presence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's the thing is what I've found is I was fearful when I first opened up that I was going to push other people away. And what I found was the wrong people, I did in fact push people away. When I opened up, I was met with negativity. I was met with, oh, you're less of a man. Oh, that's only things that women struggle with.
Wow.
So, but I found out that was the wrong person. And so to the right people I've opened up to, I've actually found that it's brought me closer to them. And so I try to tell people that you have to be able to find inner circle and the support and know that those right individuals will welcome you in. They're not going to push you away and basically invalidate your feelings. And if they do and they love you, then they may just be misunderstanding, or they don't. I think that's the other thing too, is I found that if I feel that way, it's better off if I explain my perceptions and say, hey, listen, I feel invalidated, and letting them know, so that then again we open the communication up so that they can then react accordingly. But I think we're fearful sometimes to be direct and let people know how we're truly feeling and how they make us feel, because I don't think we like confrontation, which makes sense.
Right. Yeah, me either. I always want to avoid confrontation. So it's kind of how can I avoid that discomfort? But I think what you said is a fantastic word, which is just when we are authentic and vulnerable, the people who meet us in that space, those are the people who are for us. And not everybody's going to be for us, and that's okay, but it does bring out the people who are for us, and then we can have a conversation. And then if someone that we thought was for us doesn't seem to be, verifying with them, hey, I'm actually not feeling like you're getting this very well, is a good thing, because sometimes they just don't know what to do, right? They're just I'm kind of bumbling through this, and I love you, but I don't know what to do. Someone just said your body is strong and beautiful. I think that was at me. That's awesome.
No, I missed that one.
Did you see that comment come through? Someone said your body is strong and beautiful.
Well, I think that was going to you. Yeah, we're gonna let you have that one. Here's the question. Somebody did ask though. Yeah, and I've heard this, but going through a breakup, especially during the holidays. I mean, that's what do you? I have my ways that I've been able to overcome a breakup, but I'm sure you have a lot of people that come to you and talk about this. And what do you feel helps most with individuals? I know you can't throw a blanket over everybody, but what do you find during a time like this, to give someone advice who asks that question?
Yeah, Yeah, I think, I mean, that's tough any season, right? But this season's kind of worse because there's all these events where they're like, bring your partner. And
Yeah.
so then you're like, oh, I don't have anybody. And everyone kind of does that thing where they're like, oh, okay. And so you're just reminded all the time, like chronically, that you're alone. But the thing is I think is how could I have fun in this season? So that's even a question that I ask myself a lot is how do I make this fun today where I'm at? Is it exactly where I want to be? Maybe yes, maybe no, but how do I make this fun here and take good care of myself? And that's where I think like even working out and our physical fitness becomes important, because what I see a lot of people do is they go through a breakup and they just kind of like give up, right? They just say, I'm not going to do anything. And that actually, as I'm sure you can attest to when you work with people, it's like that only makes it worse, right? Like that's the time you want to pour into yourself.
Yeah, I think that for me, what really helped me was naturally, if you're in when you break up with somebody, you feel that you're almost losing. I mean, you're losing love, and you feel it's almost. For some people, it can feel like you're losing a loved one. I mean, and I don't mean to take away from people that have lost. I've heard people say that sometimes losing somebody where you're no longer dating them can have that same type of effect if there was so much love there. And it does feel like, yeah, I will not have this person in my life anymore in the capacity that I currently have it. For me, what I found what helped me was if I felt like I lost love, then I should really go back to the other areas of my life where I do have love and remind myself of all the love I still have in my life. Because I might have lost this, so now more than anything, it's important in this time to remind myself of all the love that I do still have, as opposed to thinking about the love that I lost. So I think it's being, again, and being mindful and you mentioned it, asking questions and saying, how can I enjoy this moment of my life, this season of life? And for me, that's what I would do, ask myself that question. Okay, where do I still have love? What can I do to feel loved again since I lost love over here? And I found that it was pouring into the love in the other areas. And then when I did that, I felt even more love than before, because I'm like, oh my gosh, now I got 6 people messaging me saying like, hey, like, so great to talk to you. Like, we got to catch up soon. Let's go get drinks or whatever it is. So I think it's just understanding that there are options available for us to, not distract, but just remind ourselves of what we do have in moments when we lose things.
Absolutely. Because I mean, we often find what we're looking for, right? And so if we're looking kind of through the lens of like what I don't have a partner, we broke up, like there will always be something to be depressed and disappointed about. But if we look at like, well, who is surrounding me that cares about me? There are usually people that do too, right? And so pouring into that, especially because is often the case when we're in a relationship, some of those other relationships usually suffer a little bit because we just don't have the time. And so going back and kind of just saying like, oh yeah, these people cared about me all along. How do I invest in that and have gratitude? It does change our perspective. It still hurts, right? So we have to honor, like, it's still uncomfortable and not ideal.
Yeah.
But having that gratitude.
Do you feel, because I've done this before and I'm sure others can, and I saw someone just made the comment whenever you break up, like it hurts. And so a lot of people try to avoid those feelings and they say, let me distract myself. Let me go volunteer. Let me, go to the gym. But I feel, and maybe you can attest to this, I feel that, again, that's just pushing it off. That's suppressing it for that moment. But I do feel you have to find a time to healthily release the emotions. Is that what you would say is good as well? I mean, is it good to just continue to pack things in and distract yourself and to the point where all of a sudden, like, it just through time kind of heals it?
Yeah. Well, I think the more we pack it in, the more we pack it in. So the problem is then it spills over. And oftentimes, if we're not careful, it spills over in that new relationship. And so we're kind of like, oh, this is great. Now I feel vulnerable. Let me share all my hurts from the past. And that new person's like, what is happening right now? And you're just like, well, I've been sitting on this for a while. So the thing is like, you got to take good care of yourself and feel it. And I know probably everybody watching this is like, oh, he's a therapist. Of course he would say that. And yes, I would say that. But the reason is, if you don't deal with it now, you'll deal with it later. And I just assume you feel it in the moment because it's less awkward and weird to feel it at the time it happens than it is to feel it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think I've seen the value. I'm actually going to start up a EMDR treatment here soon because I still know that there's parts of my past that I've maybe put a Band-Aid over, but I don't know if it's necessarily healed. So that'll be really exciting. to start up. And so I've definitely seen value in what you all do, obviously, because I think a lot of times therapy wasn't what I thought it was going to be when I first went in. I thought I was going to speak for like an hour, and then the next day it would just be like, next time I went, it was going to be, all right, here's all the things you said. Here's how we're going to fix A, B, C, D, and E. But instead, all they did was ask me more questions the next time. And I was like, and then I just kept talking. And I found out I was talking and talking and talking. And I started answering my own questions to the problems that I had. I just never asked them before. I never had the right prompts. And so I found that's what therapy was for me. And again, I think it can look different for most people. I imagine you probably have some clients that walk in and look at you with a stone face and like I don't know what to talk about. So, but it was interesting to me. And so I try to share my experience and tell people it's not what you think it is. But if you don't know what it's like, the best thing you can do is go look and find out. Don't make the assumptions, because sometimes the assumptions and the fears don't end up matching up with the reality.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it can be scary because what a lot of people know about therapy is what's been portrayed on TV and movies. And so maybe
Yeah.
some of that is accurate, but also some is not, right? And so some people are like, well, therapy, like I come in and I lay on your couch, Jason. And I'm like, I don't know what to do if you lay on my couch. Like, that's
Yeah.
weird. I don't know what to do, but that's what they've seen, right? So to your point is like, we got to kind of test that out and then recognize, I work with a lot of therapists and help people grow in the business. And I always say like, you're not going to be for everybody. So every therapist is a person. And if you get connected with the therapist and you're like, it's
Yeah.
not a fit, try somebody else, right? That doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It's just not a good fit. But I love the EMDR thing. I personally have done EMDR myself, and it's been a game changer for me. And so I love that you're talking about that and getting more people kind of
Yeah, and I want to highlight this too.
knowledgeable
You just
about that.
mentioned it, and I think coming from a therapist's mouth is worth highlighting. I've had people come to me in my DMs and they said, I went to a therapist, we didn't mesh, so like therapy doesn't work for me. And to your point, I just want to place the emphasis on it as well. That I think you have to screen a therapist like any relationship. Sometimes like it's a good fit for you, but sometimes you got to kind of shop around a little bit and date around, if we want to call it that, date around with your therapist and see like which, this person is maybe not the best match for me. So let me find somebody else, because that I have had that brought up to me a few times. I didn't find a good therapist, so I guess therapy's not for me. And it's like just as important as you talking about it is you feeling that you can open up to that therapist and that they're asking the questions that get through to you. And if they don't, then it's fair for you to cut that off and go searching elsewhere. But sometimes we don't find that perfect therapist on our first try. Sometimes we have to do 2, 3, or 4 times. But eventually somebody will get through to you. In the same way that I speak about the struggles I have, I'll get through to a certain audience, but I can grab one of my teammates that had a completely different upbringing. If he says the same exact thing, he'll get through to a completely different audience because of relatability. Relatability is crucial to people opening up their eyes and ears. Like if they can relate to you, they're more likely to listen to you. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. Just as you're going to get a therapist, like you have to understand that like, if you don't feel right about it with that person, then it's okay to go to somebody else. And that's not anyone's fault. You're just searching for that compatibility.
Yeah, sometimes it's like a really cool thing for a person to say this isn't a fit, because sometimes that's the first time they've ever done that in their whole life, is to say like respectfully, this isn't a good fit for me. And so the thing is like most of therapy is relationship, and if that relationship is not there, it's okay to move on. I think if you've said like, hey, I worked with 20 therapists in the last month and none of them are a fit, I might say, oh, well, that's a lot of therapists to work with in the last month. But also, I think as you're looking for that therapist, be clear about what you do need and want from the situation, right? So where I do really well as a therapist is if you came to me and you said, Jason, I want to work on A, B, and C. That's important. Because then I know, is this within my scope? Can I help or not? And so sometimes people go into therapy and they don't have a lot of clarity about what they want help with, and then it's hard to find
absolutely.
somebody.
I think establishing expectations and just opening up and being fully like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Can you help me? And do you think this is something that we can talk about, or do I need to go somewhere else? I think I think sometimes we're fearful of saying, can you help me? And someone says, well, hey, I can't, or I just don't have the facilities to. And so then we go, oh, great. Like, and we shut down. But in reality, it just means that, hey, there's someone else out there. At least this person's being open and honest with us. And whether that's a therapist or just someone you're speaking to, a family member, I think we have to find who is that person that can have those conversations. Because I've had people in my life, loved ones that I would love to have these conversations with, but I just can't, because I don't feel that when I walk away from those conversations, it feels sometimes almost more damaging. And so then you start to over time learn, okay, I can go talk to this person about this, but then I can't talk to them about this, and that's okay. I think we start to figure out where we can open up and where we might need to pull back. So, but that's the only way you find that out is through experience, which I think is one of the greatest teachers.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the thing is most of us aren't generalists, right? So not everybody's going to be able to talk about everything. Most of us are specialists. And so we just kind of identify like, oh, grandpa's really great to talk about this with. And I think when we kind of learn to do that, we actually have healthier, happier relationships, because we're not imposing these expectations on someone that don't fit, right? Because again, not everyone's going to be everything, and we aren't either. So the other side of that is you're probably not everything to everybody either. And so just kind of saying like, how do I meet that person where they're at? That's important.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you won't be able to.
There's a really great question that just came in up here. And maybe it requires more of a specific or more detail, but I think that you can run with this. On that note, what are some tips for keeping yourself emotionally safe in situations that can be a lot, such as family gatherings? So I think, how can you protect yourself in environments that may have opened previous wounds in the past? What's the best way for navigating those environments?
Yeah, I would say keep it short. So if you're going into a very loaded situation, recognize what you're probably able to deal with and how long that is. Sometimes people will say to me like, this is gonna be really hard for me to go see my family, and I'm gonna be there for the next 6 days. And I go, oh man, that's a lot of time, right? So it's kind of like, know yourself, know what your capacity is for it, and make that a little bit time limited. And then know what you need in the moment. Some practical things are, if you're in a stressful family situation, drinking probably isn't going to help that, right? So a lot of times people be like, I don't know, everyone's drinking and I'm stressed, and so I start drinking. It's like, that is actually not going to make it better. So how do you take care of yourself well in those moments, if that's where you're going to end up?
Great advice. I was just curious of your thoughts, because again, this helps me. The more I hear, I can also understand a little and learn a little bit more about myself, which is what I find. It's like, as we all kind of look to find these answers, we can pick pieces that can affect our own lives as well and help us better understand ourselves. So and it looks like that helps somebody on here. I'm reading that. So that was awesome. Great explanation. So I know I've been kind of quizzing you here. I don't know if you realized I was going to be so I don't want to take away if you had any other specific questions. But I wanted to open it up to you a little bit here. I'll back off. If I have more questions, I'll ask, though. No promises.
Well, that's great. Are you okay on time? I know we're a little over. Is that okay with you? Okay, cool. Yeah. So what have you, I guess first thing, just to comment on what you just said, I love that, because I think being a therapist is one of the coolest jobs, because I get to do the work too, right? So it's kind of like, I'm not gonna, talk to you about something that I wouldn't do myself or haven't learned about myself. So kind of with you, like, it's cool getting to do this work personally and then helping people. I would just kind of ask you, like, as you've kind of taken this journey, what has been kind of a lesson that you've learned from all of this? I mean, do you see like we all really need more vulnerability, or mental health is more of an issue than I thought, or what are you taking away from these experiences where you're kind of stepping out?
I think what I found is, like, again, the more that I'm opening up, the more I'm seeking information and education, I start finding education and insight in places that I wasn't really directly looking. But since I start to follow, so I'm very strict about what's in front of my face now as far as material. So I'm starting to follow more people like you and experts. And so my Instagram now looks like a wall of experts in their respective fields. And what's cool about it is some days I'll see 10 things and not a single thing will resonate. But then like the next day, all of a sudden that one post from that account that's consistent just resonates with me. And I'm like, boom, like that's why I'm following these accounts, because I don't need every single day for that message to resonate. I just need that one thing to resonate in that one moment. But in order to do that, you have to be mindful of what it is you're putting in front of you. So as I went on this journey of self-reflection, I started seeking resources And just, I've been shocked at when you start taking action into what you're viewing, because what you're viewing is impacting us more than we realize. Like we may just be scrolling mindlessly, taking in, watching TV shows, and we don't know sometimes what the effect is that these shows have. They may be more damaging than good. So someone said, should we be careful on who we follow on social media? I think you should be, absolutely. I can
For
say
sure.
this, I can attest to this. I had to stop unfollowing some accounts of certain fitness influencers simply because viewing their bodies was affecting my body dysmorphia because my body didn't look like their body. They weren't doing anything wrong at all. Like they were just posting their fitness videos. But I realized that I was like, the more I see this person, the more I wish I had their body. And it's just not doing me any good by viewing it. So I just unfollowed them. I was like, you know what? I can't put this in front of me. And that's an example of just how, yeah, the impact that what we're viewing really can negatively impact us, but what we can do is take action. And so I started to be more mindful about putting the right resources in front of my face. And then I've started to find actually more resources through connections, through, again, an account might post 9 things that don't resonate, but that 10th one does. So I've found a lot, when you directly focus on something and you're more mindful, you're going to find more change. You're going to find more things that you can help with your own life. And the lessons I've learned come at the times when I'm not actively searching for that exact answer to that question. It's like I answer a question I had from 2 weeks ago. I was like, I gotta go searching for something else because I'm just actively searching. So.
Right. But you're in the right arena. And what I love about what you're saying is it's like, you got to think about social media. These are the people we're doing life with, right? Because we're literally seeing them every single day. And so that's like a big thing. If I said like, hey, Clayton, I like you. I think I'm going to move into your house and I'll see you every morning when you get out of bed. You'd be like, dude,
Yeah.
you're cool, but I don't know about that, right? But the thing is that's exactly what we're doing with social media is we're saying like, I think I will just let you into my house and I'll look at it every morning. And so the challenge is that if we have wounds or fears, oftentimes the algorithm picks up on that because of what we look at, right? So if we're going through a breakup and we're looking at people who are really speaking to the breakup, pretty soon everything we look at is about our breakup. And while that might be helpful in a minute, it is not helpful over time. And so eventually we start to construct this story about the world that has really been curated based on some of our fears and our wounds instead of where we're trying to go.
I think it's called The Social Experiment, maybe on Netflix. But what you just described is the more that we fixate on things, and I think there was a metric that showed the algorithms, they know how long we stare at certain images. So it can then say, all right, he stared at this image for this long versus this image. He has more interest in these kind of images. So then what happens? Your explore page ends up becoming more tailored to that, whatever it is you're looking at. So it really starts to bring you down, like you said, this path where now everything could be breakup focused. If you watch that one video, now you have 3 videos, and then it turns into 10 videos, and then you're just overwhelmed because you're like, oh my gosh, I can't look anywhere without there being talk of breakups. And that might have, and so it is really important that we understand as well, though, that what I'm seeing is not what somebody else might be seeing as well. So I can't assume that my perspective is the same as and what is the same as somebody else's, because my lens is unique to me. That's the good, that's the plus and the minus at the same time of social media, as it can really reinforce feelings in a negative way just as much as a positive way by doubling and tripling down. So I think it is great for us to be cognizant of that. And the best way that we can switch the algorithm is if it is impacting you, ask yourself what's impacting you, and then start removing it. And the algorithm will pick up that you're blocking accounts or you're unfollowing accounts that are like that. And next thing you know, you're shifting what you're seeing in front of your eyes. And we have that power to do that.
Absolutely. Yes. We want to curate our own experience. And I think especially like during the holidays too, if it's a season that's tough for you, make sure to kind of unfollow some of those accounts that are making it worse, because otherwise we're already struggling. And then we kind of double down on what we're taking in every single day. And it does make it worse. And so I think like part of doing the holidays, but any part of our life well, is just being cognizant of like, what am I looking at? What am I listening to? And what's the impact?
I think a great phrase is kind of like it's you are the people that you surround yourself with, but you also are the experiences you surround yourself with. You become that impacts you. And so I think we have to be aware that, and again, the experiences that you're within dictate your thoughts a lot of times. So We have that ability, though, to sometimes change those experiences, to change the surroundings, especially with social media. And so a lot of times I think people are surprised with how much better their lives can be when they just take a few active measures to rid themselves of the things that might be plaguing them that are on social media, because we spend so much time on social media these days. I mean, we do. A lot of our lives have become digital. So, but no one's patrolling it really besides us. The algorithm's pushing more of whatever it is we're looking at. No one's really policing it. So we have that power, but we have to be mindful that we have that power and also take the action.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's just, there's kind of this idea of we have to take some control over that in our life, right? And just say, like, I'm going to be careful about what I take in. It's kind of that old, programming garbage in, garbage out. It's like, if I'm only listening to this garbage stuff, like, that is all I'm going to spew out. And so that makes it really challenging and lonely at times. I'm trying to be mindful of time, but I want to ask you before we end, what is a favorite holiday memory? So as we do this, I want to kind of like end every interview with just a favorite holiday memory or tradition that you have. What would you say that is?
The first thing I think of, I got 2 younger brothers. So we used to go back, when we would go back home for Christmas, we'd all go outside. It usually would snow in Missouri, and we would grab a football and we'd run around and tackle each other for hours until we got worn out. And then we'd go inside. Mom would have some hot chocolate. We drink it, watch the football games or whatever on, and fall asleep peacefully after eating like the Christmas meal. So that was always the tradition, but we don't do that anymore. We've gotten a little bit bigger. Our joints are getting a little creakier, and now, yeah. So we have to adapt. So now we do like the what's the game where you put the phone up to your head and it, like, you have to you have to guess the word.
Yeah.
That's become our family tradition now. And you can imagine after a couple of drinks, it can get pretty fun and hectic. Yeah.
That sounds like a great tradition. Okay. All right. Well, I'm stealing.
Perfect. You can take it. Yeah.
Well, Clayton, this has been so good, man. Just, you asked fantastic questions, but also I'm just super inspired by you kind of saying, like, I have this platform and I want to use it for good, and I want to share where I'm at and be vulnerable so that maybe other people can meet me there and get some help too. And man,
I really appreciate you doing this and hopping on here and answering my questions. And I think it helped out people as well. And I just know the more times we have these conversations, the more likely we are to impact others in a positive way. So I think this is great. If it helped one person, I'm sure it did. And I saw in the comments there were more than a few. So I'm really excited and thankful. And thank you for your time, Jason. Sorry for taking you a little bit over, but I'm sure it won't be the end of us having a conversation. So I appreciate today's and I'm sure we'll be in touch.